Hi, Jasvir. I thought it would be easier to do a short film to accompany what the stuff that's in your report, right? So we do a lot of remediation, right? You and in lots of classes, one of the things that we do if a student is struggling is we remediate. The only difficulty with remediation is sometimes there's nothing to right? We've got to mediate. And that's what brings us to this conservation of constancy, right? So this is something you were tested on in college when you studied Piaget. We all passed the test, and then we promptly forget about these milestones in development that are necessary before that brain can handle our content, right? And the one that I'm addressing today is conservation of constancy, because it has such a big impact in mathematics. It has a big impact all over, right? Think about reading comprehension, decoding words. If I don't have conservation of constancy, that understanding, and I just noticed understanding is spelled improperly behind me. I'm sorry. Obviously, I was rushing to create these slides. Um, conservation of constancy, understanding that something can be the same and different at the same time, right? Easy for you and I. We developed this between the ages of 7 and 11. But the conditions have to be right for our brains to develop this. And we know that in some households, some communities, those brains don't get those conditions. So they may have not developed it at all or developed it in a kind of sketchy way. So when we look at mathematics, right? Conservation of constancy, understanding that things can be the same and different at the same time. How about communicative or associative property, right? That in terms of addition or multiplication, it doesn't matter how the numbers and letters are arranged, the answer is always going to be the same. That's mind blowing if I don't have conservation of constancy. So, one of the approaches that we take, right, does this student need remediation or does this student need mediation? Do they need a root cause fix before we can get into what we're trying to pile on, right? So, the three questions that I look at in a classroom is what cognitive structure is necessary for the students to be successful in the lesson that the teacher is presenting right now? How the teacher assess for that cognitive structure, right? Because we just start teaching our content, and if we're not aware of some of the more limiting limitations that a student has, we're spinning our wheels and theirs. And then how was the teaching, not he, sorry, how was the teaching of that structure incorporated into the lesson or the learning center? So, for instance, conservation of constancy, right? In math, you work with graphs, you work with manipulatives, and you are telling students that what's in back of me on this slide is exactly the same. There's no difference. And when you look at it, you see it is absolutely different. It's a different shape, it's a different size, it's a different arrangement of the numbers underneath. How can 5 times 3 possibly be the same as 3 times 5? Right? To us, it's you don't even think about it. But we're now pausing to think about what happens to a student who doesn't have conservation of constancy. And then because you're teaching algebra, oh my God, letters now can mean numbers. Like it's not just I'm messing up the order of the numbers, but I'm substituting number letters for numbers. A letter can even maybe be another letter, right? So here's real story. I was doing a demo lesson in a juvenile justice classroom. So it was I was going in to teach an algebra lesson. There were about 7 young men in the classroom. So I always assess for conservation of constancy, right? So what I did is, I don't know if you'll be able to, I held up 2 markers. Right now, this is 2 pens, but I said, guys, this is the do now. Here's your piece of paper, number it 1 through 4. They got that done. I said, okay, are these 2 pens the same length or is one of those longer? Write down your answer, same or longer. Now watch up here. And Jasvir, sorry, the camera isn't as great, but I just changed these pens, shifted them. And I said, number 2, are these 2 pens the same length or is one longer? Right? Then I held up 2 pieces of paper. So this isn't going to work really well at all, but 2 equal pieces of printer paper, right? And while I was holding them, I said, okay, number 3, are these 2 pieces of paper the same size or does one have more paper in it? And then what I did is I folded a piece of paper like a hamburger bun, if you can see, just one of them. So I held up one piece of paper still whole, and then the other piece of paper was folded in half. And the young men watched me fold that piece of paper in half. Number 4, I said, gentlemen, write down your answer. Do those 2 pieces of paper have the same amount of paper, or does one have more? Out of the 7 students in that class, 6 wrote same longer, same more. One kid got it right. And he was like, he couldn't believe that his classmates were just not where he was. And he's like, what do you mean? So I said the one guy was LaShawn who got it. And then it was Nathaniel who was just really flummoxed, right? So I said, LaShawn, give me your hoodie, right? So I held the hoodie up for Nathaniel and I said, Nathaniel, will this hoodie fit LaShawn? And he said, absolutely, right? He just saw it. So then I took the hoodie and I folded it as if I was folding laundry. And I put it in my hand and I said, Nathaniel, will this hoodie still fit LaShawn? And he looked at me, he said, yeah, it's LaShawn's sweatshirt. So I said, oh, so you just told me that this, and I unfolded it, is the same as this. That's just like 2x, right? So just doing it once probably didn't shift it in his head. But as an instructor, now I've just gathered that much information about how the brains process information in my classroom, which makes me increases my ability to deliver lessons so that they will take root. So when I debriefed with the teachers, because this was a fishbowl lesson, there were about 5 teachers in the back of the classroom watching me deliver this lesson. And after I do a demo lesson, I always ask the teachers 3 questions. What'd you see? What'd you notice? What sense did you make of it? So I asked them that, and here was their response. Well, they're special ed, which, as you can see by my face, kind of deflated me. I just showed them where the problem was, but because the students had a label, an IP, had an excuse, they didn't have to change their practice much. So watching how you break things down for your students, I know you will take this information and use it and think about it and reflect on it. Uh, in that on your actual coaching report, there's a link to a Wikipedia article. In that article, it shows you different ways you can assess for this, right? And it's the standard. You saw what I did with pens and paper, pouring water, right, from a narrow cylinder to a more round bowl. The volume of water stays the same, but the students usually think it's changed because it looks so much lower in the wider cylinder. Have fun.